from Sunnis' perspective, they don't consider them Muslims. And of course, they're like, we're going to crush them and crush them so that they cannot rise up, because the only threat to this government of Jolani is from Latakia. And so he wants to eliminate all possible threats that are coming from there.
I saw a picture. There was a Syrian, fighter crucifying a Christian.
You have a large population that feels the desire for revenge.
Islam will continue to be triumphant until there have been 12 Khulafa, all of them from Al-Quraysh.
The God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed. Nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever.
This is my brother, my executor, and my successor among you, so listen to him and obey.
My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting.
Whoso obeys me obeys God. Whoever disobeys me disobeys God. Whoever disobeys my commander disobeys me.
The Lord said to me, You are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession.
Two systems of government, two visions for life on earth. Whichever is true changes everything. This is Christ and Khulafa.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Christ and Caliphate. On this show, we talk about Middle Eastern politics and timeless biblical principles. There has been recent violence on the west coast of Syria.
I saw a picture that was credible and verified that there was a Syrian, I can't pronounce his last name,
Jolani. Yes.
Fighter crucifying a Christian. So they took him and they nailed him to a cross, and they were tying him up and binding him there. So it's bad. And the report that I read, trying to nail down numbers, they're saying as many as 30,000 Christians have been killed already, and talking about more coming, and also Alawites. So, Muslims who are not Sunnis about that.
So here's my first controversial take of the day. So I looked at that video as well, and it's existed since 2017.
Oh, wow.
And from everything I can tell, it's actually a jihadi being crucified by the
Are you for real?
Assad regime, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So what I'm pretty sure...
So that's our show today.
Debunk, yeah?
No, well, okay, I don't want to be full on with debunking mode here, because there really have been Christians who have died in the last week in Syria. It's a real thing, but the primary...
And we don't know that they're not being crucified either. So
Sure.
If I looked at that, but sure.
Sure, there are definitely Christians who are suffering in Syria.
Sure.
But from everything I can tell right now, the sequence of events is that you have some pro-regime cells, like Assad regime cells, operating in Latakia and surrounding area. Is it Latakia or Latakia? Latakia.
Yes.
There's pro-regime forces still operating in Latakia, and HTS, the new Syrian government under Jolani, sent their forces to kind of deal with some of these people. And their attempt to deal with these militias ended up turning into a bloodbath of civilians.
So my point, which I want to emphasize on, what is ground situation and who those people are, particularly about Alawites, right? When we would think of Alawites, you have to consider that in Islamic jurisprudence, Alawites are seen with an eye of doubt when it comes to their belief, because their beliefs are weird. I'm not here to say that they're not Muslims completely, because of course they believe in God, they believe in Muhammad, but again, the status of Ali in their mind, of course, Alawites are Shiites group, right? They are offshoot of Shia, but for them, Ali has the status of God, close to God. So this is shirk and kufr, right? So if that is the condition, then of course they're not considered Muslims, number one. And of course, in a place where there is a lot of things happening at the same time, and the Sunnis are taking over. Of course, the Alawites started rebellion against the present Sunni government of Jolani, right? So now there is a fight and there's lots of civilians being killed, right? But of course, from Sunnis' perspective, they don't consider them Muslims. And of course, they're like, we're going to crush them and crush them so that they cannot rise up, because the only threat to this government of Jolani is from Latakia. And so he wants to eliminate all possible threats that are coming from there.
And I think one way to explain what's going in here is that the Assad regime was brutal.
Yes, indeed it was.
And there were people who just disappeared into holes. There were people who were just sort of cut in two. There was chemical warfare against his own people. Awful stuff. And you have a large population that feels the desire for revenge.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever you have that pent up, it kind of becomes like Daenerys Targaryen in Game of Thrones season 8. It doesn't matter if the bells sound, you're just unloading that onto people. And that is unfortunately what's happening to the people of Latakia, or has happened to the people of Latakia.
Right.
Now, this isn't necessarily the Syrian government's policy, but the problem Jolani has is that he has a force of decentralized jihadists that have now become the government. And for him to control every single aspect like a centralized government is a very complicated thing to do.
Right. And I'll go back to the point where we talked about how this propaganda out there about Christians and Christianity in Syria, and it gives us, like, you debunked that theory that how it is not right. What I'm going to bank on one particular point, that how we are so easily driven by our own biases. So easy. It's so easy because we have emotional connections to those biases, right? And whenever we hear, without going further into details of what can be and what cannot be, we're just simply taking it as a face value. And that's the problem with many, many more problems in the United States, in the world, and whole across wherever you talk.
I mean, my counter to that would be, I'm watching videos on Twitter of people getting shot. Like, clearly in Syria, clearly by Jolanis. So, like, maybe some of the facts are misrepresented, right? And maybe some of the facts are being twisted, but there's clearly something going on. And regardless of whatever people are saying, like, on the ground. So, for instance, I was just looking at a news article about the Greek Orthodox pastor in Damascus giving a sermon, okay? Saying, like, okay, Christians are getting killed alongside of, Alawites. So, my point is, that guy also has a gun to his head, and he can't say anything either, right? Like, so if you were to sit there and say, no, they're targeting Christians, right? The way that he even put it was they're getting killed alongside it. No, they're being targeted. You're targeting civilians, and you're not caring if they're Christians or if they're Alawites or whatever. You're targeting civilians, and you're targeting civilians because of what you are. Now, who's doing it? I don't know who's doing it, right? But if the person giving the sermon says that, we're getting killed alongside, he also said, don't jump to conclusions, right? Okay, so I have to believe him, but I also have to believe that he has a gun to his head, right? I also have to believe that if he gets up and says something other than that, he's putting himself and others in danger. Because we have, essentially a wild card, right? Like, we have a rebellion that resulted in a revolution that resulted in a very violent purging. And it's not like we don't have footage of people being shot in prisons, but also being released from prisons, right?
Yeah.
So it's also, my point is that it's like, you can take facts, you can throw facts out there, but there are also things going on.
So there's real danger in Syria. Like, nobody knows where exactly the cards are going to land here. This could still be a terrible situation for the majority of Syria's Christian population.
Yeah, because, and I will, of course, add on to your point, is because there has been a war for so many years, right? I wish and pray that Syria will come back to a normal place where everybody can enjoy freedom of day-to-day life, right? But that's not the case. It's kind of like going through rehabilitation, rebuilding process, which I do not know that this peace is guaranteed for how long. And Syria is sitting at the fault lines. That's the problem.
I would argue that it's not a peace.
Yeah,
I would say that
this is a truce.
there was the majority, the Assad forces were driven back to the point of defeat. So, maybe there are some still active, but for the most part, they got their butts kicked and their leader had to leave, and, they no longer have control of the capital and all that other stuff. So, it's always the winner, right, who gets to dictate the terms. So, what you have now is, do you have people wanting democracy? Do you have people wanting theocracy? Do you have people, and I think you have all of those things. I think that you have people who are like, no, we should be a theocracy. No, we should be
Democracy.
a democracy. No, we should be a republic. No, we should,
Islamic Republic.
Islamic Republic, right? Like, we should do this and we should do that. So I think it's sloppy and messy, and I think that everyone's going to take their own perspective of facts and try and advance them. But the people like that pastor, for instance, what's he going to say in public? Versus what's he going to say in private, right? What are his people telling him? They killed my grandmother. They killed my uncle, right? We were getting ready to go to, I don't know. I'm creating fictitious circumstances. I mean, maybe that's not helpful, but my point is, who knows? Right?
The fact is, Jolani, or Ahmed Al Shara, as he's now being called, was an Al Qaeda guy. He was an ISIS guy at one point. Right. Now, does that mean he can't turn around from that? Absolutely not. But I think it's going to be a while before everyone can breathe a sigh of relief and say, "Oh yeah, everything's good in Syria," and especially the minorities there.
Yeah.
My point is, they never won elections, right? They only won elections when they're sure that they'll win. And that's just like a total thing in the Middle East, right? Like, we won elections when we know that it'll come out in our favor, Remember, Saddam went in, shot everybody in parliament, right? Shot all of the leaders, everything, cleansed everybody politically in Iraq that was of opposition, and then he had elections. So,
yeah, that's the mindset. The problem is in the mindset. Those people, Middle East, don't want democracy. And of course, it's backed by these Islamic. I won't go much into details of like how that system works, but the system itself works on this principle that you need to have a rightly guided person leading you in the most Islamic way possible. And I think there are factions, as I said, it's Syria sitting on the fault line. There are Kurds on the side who want their independence, and then...
Although they just signed a deal with Syria to become one integrated state.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. That's a new progress. That's good. I mean, like, if Syria is going towards peace under Jolani's leadership, that's a good sign. And I think, when you are clearing the rubbles, then of course come some problems alongside. And I think this is an aftershock of what we are seeing in Latakia, is aftershock of war, because Assad has failed and Assad is not coming back. Assad regime is over. And repeat, Assad regime is over. He's not coming back. So what he's trying to do is his people, at least, are trying to use whatever the weaponry or whatever the arsenal they have to unleash on this particular government, but they will not succeed, of course. It's just a small, tiny fraction.
So, you guys want to hear Ahmed Al Shara's statement on the massacre?
Sure.
So he put out this. He says, "We affirm that we will hold accountable firmly and without leniency anyone who is involved in the bloodshed of civilians or harming our people, who overstep the powers of the state or exploits authority to achieve his own ends. No one will be above the law, and anyone whose hands are stained with the blood of Syrians will face justice sooner rather than later."
Beautiful.
So that's good talk.
Yeah, from the face-saving perspective, yeah.
Now, what he does with that will make all the difference, of course. But it's at least an encouraging first step, because he could just say,
I'm being very cynical. I'm in a very cynical mood today. So I feel like said Muammar Gaddafi, said Saddam Hussein, said, go back.
Do you think you're comparing Jolani in the race of Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein and his like?
I'm looking at authoritarian tactics to keep a population aligned. And at that matter, you could add Putin. At that matter, you could add, I don't know, like
Donald Trump,
Chavez. I mean, the problem is that like you can say what you want about Trump, but it's not an armed revolution, right? So, if I want to right now, I can go vote for whoever the heck I want. If I want to right now in America, if I don't feel like paying my taxes, then I'm going to go to jail and I'm going to get a trial, right? Mm. Those things are going to happen here. Will that change in 5, 10, 20, tomorrow? Who knows? I don't know. But right now, I can do whatever the heck I want. And people can say Trump is authoritarian and he's this or he's that. And you could point to the same things in any administration. And again, to your point, right? It's all whoever's saying it. Mm-hmm. This is authoritarian. This is authoritarian. This is authoritarian. But the nature of political power is authority. The nature of political power is wrapped up in having, an authority. And the idea is how do you get the authority? Do you get the authority by like a vote of the people, by a political process, or do you get it by, a revolution and strongman tactics and eliminating your opposition? If we were to look at Putin, for instance, he literally killed his opposition. I mean, it's not a secret, so.
Well, here's my thoughts on that. So let's say Jolani ends up being a dictator, which is entirely plausible. There's still different branching outcomes of that. We could have the UAE as a dictatorship, which is generally like benevolent. And then you'd have much less benevolent dictatorships in the world as well. So wherever the direction of Syria goes through its political structure, I think being open-minded right now, not being naive, but being open-minded is important. And I think being able to differentiate properly, give credit where credit is due, but also correction where correction is due would be prudent at this time in US foreign policy towards Syria and the way Christians think about Syria in general. Because I think, so while there's real Syrian Christians who have suffered in the last week, and there's noise of things that have not happened in the last week. And it's very important for us to be able to differentiate between what is real and what is not. Because by being able to differentiate properly, then we can have a proper, reasoned conversation and approach to this. I'm not saying it's definitely going to work. Again, Jolani might turn into an awful authoritarian dictator that's worse than Assad was. Mm-hmm. Or could be okay.
That's a hit or miss.
Yeah.
I think, given that, I will just reiterate one point that in Syria, the way he came with strongman, because Assad was not letting any democratic process to go through, no elections. So
yeah, they only let stuff happen when they know they'll win.
Yes, so no choice for people but to take arms and fight. right? So that's how, but I think we got to be optimistic and we got to be positive. And we say, yeah, with all good intentions, we want Syria to get back to normal.
So, guys, thank you for listening to Christ and Caliphate. We'll be back next time.